Hi, this is Roger, welcome back. This is a continuation of the previous video, and that reading there is not flipping funny. We're having a little mini heat wave in the UK again. This doesn't happen often. Now basically it's just starting to cloud over. That will cool down rapidly. But the problem I've got today is the outside temperature is 26-27 degrees, which in the UK is high. Yesterday it was 28. This is a mini heat wave and it ends today. It may still be warmish tomorrow. Warmish I can cope with, but that sort of temperature in here is exasperated by the very fact that the air being sucked in to get rid of the hot air and replace it with cooler fresh air is not working. When the outside temperature is hot, all you're doing is producing fresh air, but it's still warm, so it doesn't really cool down properly. Now, with a reasonably high humidity which I've got, that temperature is tolerable for most of the orchids. I'll live with it because it doesn't last long in the UK. I feel sorry for some of you guys that have had, you know, well up in the 30s, possibly heading towards 40 for week after week after week. I would find that a bit debilitating because we're just not used to it here in the UK. We just don't get it. So, excuse me. So anyway, continuing, I thought what I'd do is that last time I looked around my gadgets and how this setup works was quite a long time ago, and since then there have been a lot of new subscribers, so a lot of new people are sort of looking at the plants in the grow room and don't necessarily know how it all hangs together and how I've set it up. So I thought I'd have a look at that, and then we'll carry on with just some of my likes and things that have done well for the year and some more bits and bobs. Okay, and just a thought while I'm at it, there's lots of new people that perhaps didn't see gadgets, so fast update on gadgets. I've got 2 foggers, they get filled up every day, they hold 3.5 litres, and on a warm sunny day they empty during the day, so that's 7 litres of lovely cool mist dispersed into the grow room every single day when it's warm. One lives down there, just decided to turn off, yeah, cheers mate. This circulating fan hits that fogger and takes that cool mist into this area here, which has got my Masdevallias, it's got some Paphiopedilums, various things that like high humidity and do not like the heat. So they stay low down where it's cooler. Oh, while we're at it, that Restrepia's just opened. Oh, that's a pretty flower. Tiny but pretty, and there's another one over there open too. These flower on and off, year in, year out, quite honestly. They're not too keen on putting out a lot of flowers when it's hot, but they do flower on and off. 2 good strong plants there. Yeah, so that's the cooler section basically. It's heavier shading and it gets the mist from that fogger distributed by that circulating fan. There's another circulating fan up there, and that clears the roof basically. That keeps all of the plants moving around. And you know the theory, if you don't let the air sit still on your leaves, they will stay cooler. If you let still hot air sit on the leaves, your leaves will overheat. So they do need that air movement. So 2 big circulating fans. That's my extractor fan there. That sucks the heat out from the high point where the heat naturally makes its way. And then buried down in there, which you've got a job to see, is the inlet fan. That's whirring away at the moment. Now that brings in cooler air from outside. It's also fresh air, also very important. And distributed around the place are a few of these little PC fans. They're little 12-volt fans. They're £5 for 2. And they run off a little adapter up there on the bank of things. Yeah, there's another one high up, and there's a couple more. There's another little one there, and there's another one buried right in underneath there that puts cool air directly onto the Miltoniopsis and the Deisas, which aren't doing very well, but they're alive. I'm surprised. Neither of these plants, Deisas, they don't like the heat. Okay? Now Miltoniopsis can take some light if you can keep them cool. They don't like it hot. So these are not doing much at the moment. They're not dying, but they're not growing very quickly either. They don't like this time of year. But soon, you know, another 3 or 4 weeks time, the amount of light that they get, you know, will be less because the sun will be lower in the sky, and they'll start doing better. So just a few things on gadgets. As far as electronics and controls are concerned, that little unit there is a thermostat. So basically that's got a little thing that sits up in the roof. I doubt if I can film it. That monster's in the way. Oh, there it is, under that little piece of tape. But basically that's the temperature gauge, lives right in the roof as high as I can get it. And that temperature is therefore not a true reading because it's the highest point. So that's set at 27 degrees, and when it reaches 27 degrees, that fan and that fan come on. And if the temperature drops below that, it shuts it down. And that big thing with all the little black buttons on is nothing more than an electronic timer. And that's set to come on at 9:15 in the morning, and at the moment it goes off about 7 o'clock in the evening. And that actually controls that and that. They just come on no matter what the weather. Now, thinking towards winter time, down there is my little oscillating fan heater, not currently connected. And up here is another one of those little temperature gauges that currently isn't doing anything. But come winter time, that little heater unit down there sits up on a table, brings it up to this sort of height so that it's pushing the heat out below mid-level but not at floor level, because obviously hot air rises. Yeah, and at the time I fix that up, that will be connected up to that thermostat and also that fan right up in the roof. So what happens is when the temperature drops down below 15 degrees, the oscillating fan heater kicks in, as does that fan. That gets disconnected from its summertime usage, and they work together, because obviously hot air from a fan heater rises pretty damn quick, and I don't want all that heat up in the roof. So the fan heater itself pushes the heat out into the room, and then that one stops it collecting in the roof. It moves it all around, so I get an even temperature distribution. That's thinking forward to winter. And on the grounds of winter, I've got dendrobiums all over the place, and quite a few of them are going to get a winter rest. I did say I was moving stuff around yesterday. Basically I moved the nobiles, the giants, onto this shelf, simply because that shelf is that much lower than the shelf they were on. They were touching the roof. Well, obviously leaves touching the roof is not a good idea. If you want to burn them, that's a good place to leave them. If you don't want them burnt, then get them away from your glass. Don't let leaves touch glass or an outside thing that can get hot. I don't care whether it's plastic, polycarbonate, whatever it is. Don't get your leaves on the glass. They will frazzle in the sunshine. So the cattleyas are now up there. There's only one giant up the back there, and it's not touching the roof, so it's okay. So cattleyas have moved, and the nobiles and a couple of other bits and bobs have moved. Okay, so that's what I was up to yesterday. I was just swapping those two shelves around while I was watering. As each plant had to be lifted down to be watered, I just stuck them all on the floor, and then when I'd finished, I picked them all up and put them in their new place. So while we're on a subject of things I'm pleased with, I'm very pleased with this, but that's not my efforts, that's a purchase. Okay, it's only a Dendrobium phalaenopsis hybrid. No name, probably has got a name, but I'm not bothered. You know, I'm quite happy with phalaenopsis hybrids. It's even got a posh label because it went to a show. But with 3 strong new growths on that plant, I'm more than happy with the plant. You know, each one of these new growths is potentially, oh, look at that. It's got a spike. Can you see it? Yay! So already one of these new growths has decided to flower. Now, Phalaenopsis, Dendrobium phalaenopsis hybrids, they'll obviously have, when you get the plant, the largest cane. That will normally be the one that's got the flower spike on, which attracted your attention and said, oh, I must have that plant, like we do. But what you're looking for in one of those plants is new growths as well. Otherwise, you've got to wait for those new growths to actually sprout out and mature before you're going to get spikes. Another thing, Phalaenopsis type Dendrobiums do not only flower from the terminal, yeah? So as they mature, you know, they keep pushing out a leaf one side, a leaf the other side, and they keep alternating like that, and eventually the plant will say that cane is now mature. So I don't need to grow any more leaves. And at that point it'll be thinking about pushing out a spike. And that may well be a terminal spike, as this one is, right at the very top between the top two leaves. Yeah? But if you look at this one, its first spike is not going to be a terminal spike. That might mean it'll produce a terminal spike as well. It's just that this one's the forerunner, the first one to come out. And in addition, on those flowered canes, it's still likely that it can produce more flower spikes from lower down. They're quite happy to produce canes from lower leaf joints. I mean, I've seen a Phalaenopsis type Dendrobium with 5 spikes, literally one out of the terminal and another 4 pushing out lower down. So they are capable of doing that. Now with the hybridization process, it depends what went into the makeup of the plant. Some of them are not as floriferous, I think is the word. Yeah, floriferous. That's a mouthful. And basically will only produce 1 or 2 spikes on a cane, and others will produce a lot. And it just depends on the makeup. Depends what made that plant up in its sort of original thing. So yeah, I'm pleased with that. I'm also pleased with this one that's just decided to open. More so because the original flower on that I filmed a couple of weeks ago was seriously distorted. So I had to be cautious of the whole plant. A distorted flower can mean a virus. Don't all run off and panic. Viruses are rare. Yeah? They're not commonplace. It'd be unusual if you've got a true virus. You can get mold, you can get bacterial infections, you can get all that sort of stuff, yeah. But viruses are pretty damn rare. Well, they are in my environment anyway. And I reuse my water, so I'm pushing me luck. Don't go ahead and do that because Roger said. I just said that's what I do. But that's a beautiful bloom. And the new blooms that have just opened are perfect. So no virus, no worry with the plant. Just an odd bloom that was way ahead of its time on that spike. And that's what I put it down to, and I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. The rest of the spike looks fine. So far, so good, as they say. So another little pleased with. And out of my Dendrobiums, I think the Kingianum type Dendrobiums are my least favourite. I can't give a single reason for it, but this is a Kingianum type hybrid, so it's a no ID. But basically I bought it on that mount, and it had these sort of size canes, and I thought that's what it was, that's how it was going to work. And then the following year it put up some better canes, and this year it's just gone mad, and it's pushed up canes the like of this. You know, that cane is bordering on, it's a good 20 inches long. Good size base to the new canes, they are huge. Yeah, and that's capable of pushing out 4 or 5 flower spikes on each of those canes. You can sort of, if I take a look at that one, you can sort of get a feel for where the canes are going to come out. There'll be one there, possibly one there, there'll be one in there, and maybe even one lower down. So that's going to be one hell of a spring flowering on that. So that one can stay. My berry odour that I've got, I split into 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I may keep one, I may actually get rid of all of them. They've only just been repotted. I need to see some new roots down in the pot. I think it's a bit rude to take a plant along to your Orchid Society that's not in good nick. Some of the ones I've got from the Orchid Society, they've obviously brought them in because they're dying, and that's outrageous to do that to your colleagues at an Orchid Society, or it is to me. So basically these are pushing out new growths, so they are starting to grow, And along with those new growths, there will be new roots. Some signs of new roots on that one already. So I've got a meeting this Friday. Those plants are not going into that meeting. Probably in a couple of meetings' time. In fact, a good time to take those in will either be our Christmas do, when we all get dressed up and pig out and drink too much alcohol, you know, that's what Christmas is for, or the following one at the end of January, when at least the spikes should be showing by then, and by then I'll have good roots in the pot. Now, from my point of view, I don't care how much money I get from those plants. I didn't pay much for the original plant, and it was a big plant, and it grew well. It didn't flower as well as I would hoped. It flowered, don't get me wrong, it had a mass blooming this spring. But looking at the blooms themselves, yes, they were scented, they were quite small, they were a nice colour, but I think the expression is they didn't float my boat. I've got other Dendrobiums that take up a lot less space and produce much better bloomings than that does. Now, you know, I don't want to get rude or anything, but a lot of the Australian types don't do it for me. I love the canes, I love the leaf, I love all about them, but the blooms don't do so much for me. And Berryoda is a hybrid between Kingianum and Bijibum. I heard an Australian say it properly, Bijibum. I still like Biggie Bum. Anyway, it's a taste thing. Apparently it's pronounced Bijibum. Still looks like Biggie Bum to me. And I can imagine the Australian accent saying Biggie Bum. I like it. Anyway, so those three are probably not long for this world. And just think about it. Look how much space. That's going to give me over half a shelf back. So instead of 3 rather large plants with blooms I'm not particularly fussed on, I can get 6 plants on there. So that's the idea, is to cycle round. Have some plants for a while. Decide whether they're up near your favourites and you really like them and you must keep them at all costs and eventually move towards specimen plants. Or you've tried them and perhaps you're not so keen. Well, let somebody else have a go with those and get something different in. You know, perhaps even try a new type, a new genus that you haven't tried before. That's what I do. I don't go mad. You know, when I decided to have some Masdevallias, I didn't go out and buy 20 Masdevallias, I bought 2. And I thought, we'll see how they go. And they didn't do bad, so then you keep your eye out and see if you can find a couple more. And as long as you get nice plants and they seem to be doing okay, you've then got a new type of orchid in your collection. And it's nice. Oh, I've just noticed that as well. That's just opening. That's the Psychopsis alba. So no red, basically, simple thing. I still don't see why that wasn't actually called, oh, never mind. But anyway, that's opening, and that's opened a few more blooms in the last day since I did the original film. Anyway, so, you know, the Ceramis project, those that are left in the Ceramis are going to stay there for a bit. Don't know how long. That's not a long-term project for me, I don't think. And I've explained why in a previous video. So as I'm pottering around, I'll keep finding a few other things, and this is going to build up to a video of lots and lots of little bits and pieces, because that was its plan anyway. So I'll keep going. Okay, this is just basically Vandas. Vandas are incredibly thirsty plants. They will drink almost as much water as you can give the flipping things. So give them some water. They're also high feeders. Give them some feed while they're actively growing. And I'll tell you why I make that point. I've had Vandas for several years now. They've never bloomed. And although they've grown, they haven't been rocketing away. They've just been ticking over. And then I was watching one of Danny's videos back in the balcony days, those of you who go back that far, and she was talking about Vandas and hydrating them. And the fact that spraying the roots isn't going to hack it, quite honestly. You know, a lot of that water will run off before it even soaks in. And she's recommended dunking them and actually soaking them for a while. And since I started doing that, thank you Danny, they rocketed on. And I've got blooms this year. I mean, this is my widest Vanda. These are very big leaves. It's a very, very large Vanda, but it's still a relatively young Vanda given its height. If you look at the number of leaves on there, you know, it should be up here, a nice mature plant, it should be way up. But, like I was saying, if we dig down in there, yay! So that'll be its first bloom. And I know it might sound a bit hopeful, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if it puts out a second one in quick succession, because this has come on in leaps and bounds this year. So I dunk Vandas in a bucket and they stay in there for an amount of time. I won't say how long, because sometimes I'll put one in a bucket and go and do something else in the house and it might stay there an hour. Doesn't hurt it. You're not going to rot roots off dunking a Vanda in a bucket when it's actively growing. It will take that level of hydration. So mine get dunked in a bucket. Nothing else gets dunked in a bucket, just the Vandas. And basically it's because they've only got aerial roots. And it's got to have time for all of those aerial roots to soak in as much moisture as it possibly can. Now on a really hot day, I could get away with doing that again later in the day. Twice a day? Yep. They'd take it and it would help them on. But they only get one. That's as much as I can do at the moment. So just a quick thing on Vandas. This one's a well-bloomed one, the one my daughter got me. These were my last 2 flower spikes. Since I got it, let me think, that's a new leaf, that's a new leaf, that's a new leaf, and another one coming. Now it is possible that that will bloom again before the growing season slows down. Slowing down growing seasons, right, this is the UK. Now we went from our maximum day length of 16.5 hours, yeah, and it is rocketing downwards at the moment at its maximum rate. And it's a rate of about 3 minutes 40 seconds a day. So the day is getting shorter by that much. I mean, at the moment, I think it's about 14 hours. It'll be down to 13.5 by the end of this month. That's not many days' time. And that'll take us into September. And some people might starting to be thinking about autumn or even planning for winter. But by the end of September, our day length's going to be down below the magic 12 hours. And through October, it's going to rocket downwards, it does slow up later, and start heading down towards 11. And once the day length is below 11 hours, a lot of plants will not be getting the true amount of light they need. Their response will be to slow down. They're heading into an autumn. Now, where they come from, there's no such thing. A lot of these are tropical orchids. There is no autumn, there is no spring. Strictly speaking, there isn't a summer or a winter. They'll have a wet season and a dry season, but they won't have the seasonal variations that we get in the UK and other parts of the world. You know where you live, you know what it's like. Okay, so the plants will be thinking about slowing down. When they start slowing down, they've got less time to grow during the day, and they start growing slower. So what are they going to need less of? Water. So the gap between your watering will need to get bigger. You'll need to plan for this. Yeah? And in addition to that, if they're slowing down, they won't need as much feed. Now on the Dendrobium front, that's heading towards, I know there's 2 magic times. Some people say you shouldn't feed or water between Halloween, which is, I've forgotten, end of October, through to Valentine's Day, which is the middle of February. Roger doesn't agree with that. If my Dendrobiums are still actively growing, they will still get some water and they will still get a little bit of feed. If they're pushing out new leaves on canes, they're still growing. I'm not going to put a calendar date and say, bump, nobody gets any more food or water, that's your lot, mate. I can't do that. That doesn't seem logical to me. So, it'll be at individual plant level. Some plants will slow up quicker than others. And as they slow up, I'll reduce the watering. And the idea in my case is that I am going to do a dry, bright, cool winter rest for some of my Dendrobiums and try and get the flipping things to bloom next spring, because they didn't this spring. So it's, it's got to be done basically. So what I'm aiming to do is slow down the watering and feed at plant level I'll judge each plant on its individual growth or lack of it, and slowly but surely reduce it down, probably from about the middle of November, maybe even the end of November with some plants. I had Dendrobium still growing at the beginning of December last year. I'm not going to stop them. If they want to grow, I'll let them grow. But then gradually through December we will be getting down towards our shortest days, which are atrociously short and horrible, dull, miserable, typical UK winter days. The light level is appalling. And I don't do artificial light, so I'm stuck with that. But then, once we get all the Christmas frivolities over, my Dendrobiums are going to take a visit. They're going to go up in the back bedroom, which faces what little bit of sun and brightest light there is, on the windowsill. No blinds, no curtains, nothing. Straight through the glass. Whatever light's available comes straight in on the plants. That's as bright as I can get. In addition to that, the radiator will go off and the temperatures will be reduced down. And then as we get into January, obviously that's our coldest part in this year is January, February normally, and I plan to go from about the second week in January through to a point in February as yet undetermined, because I haven't done this before. But at some point, everywhere you read and everyone you listen to that does this rest thing, at some point they will start pushing out either buds or new growths. And that's the time to very gently start introducing a bit more water. Now, while those beasties are sat up on that windowsill, I'm not going to let them shrivel. I will still keep my eye on them. To me, there is no such thing as no water. I don't ever want to wish that on my plants. And you have to bear in mind up in the bedroom, the humidity level is going to drop down. They're going to need some hydration, but it will be done at plant level. And I'll have to keep my eye very carefully on the canes. I need to know what they look like when they go up there to see any changes. So if I see any form of shriveling or anything on the canes, they will get a small amount of water just to push them back up again. You have to bear in mind with Dendrobiums, there is a point at which a cane can start to desiccate and you can rehydrate it and it'll plump up pretty quick. But if you let it get too far, all those creases and everything that are produced as the canes start to desiccate will not plump up. So you're not going to rehydrate them canes. That's what they're going to look like forevermore. And I don't want that with my Dendrobiums. Okay, so just some quick thoughts on winter. I just thought, as this is the first time this has ever bloomed, and it always gets filmed up in the roof where it lives, I've just got it down to water it, so I thought now's a chance to sort of get in a bit closer. These are not spectacular Vanda colours, they're delicate Vanda colours, and as such I love this plant. You know, the big, huge big bluey type things with the tessellations are all very well and good, and you know, they do put spectacular colours into hybrids, but this is a little species. You know, so somebody walking through the forest turned a corner and came across something like this hanging off a tree. I quite would like to be that person one day, and maybe I'll work towards that before I get too old to climb the hills, as they say. But anyway, I just thought I'd get in a bit closer. They're not huge blooms, but they've got a beautiful shape to the lip. And I love those things. You know, it's just nice. And there's going to be a lot of them. There's 3 spikes on this. And they've all got, what have we got then? 2, 4, 6, 8. They've all got 9-ish, 8, 9, 10 buds. So, that, you know, give that a day or two, get a few more open. That's going to be quite a little show. Unfortunately, it has used up 3 of its available blooming nodes, as I call them. A Vanda's a strange thing, because it's monopodial, it just grows upwards. And I've heard it said by people who grow Vandas that certainly in the UK you can think of a set of 4 leaves like you would think of a pseudobulb on a cattleya type, or perhaps an oncidium type. So just because you've grown 1 new leaf doesn't mean you have a new blooming node ready to go. This one's obviously built up a lot of strength over its time and pushed out 3, probably because it hasn't flowered before, because it didn't get enough hydration, I suspect, which we've already talked about. But you know, I mean, new leaves on here start there, so we've effectively got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I suspect as a consequence of at least 4 of those new leaves, that's what sparked it to bloom. Now it's going to have to produce probably another 2 or 3 leaves before it's ready again. So I doubt if this one will bloom again this year. It might do, but I doubt it. I don't mind being proved wrong. In fact, I'd love to be proved wrong in this case. But I suspect, you know, this is going to slow down in the winter. The growth rate will slow down considerably, lack of light and all that sort of stuff, and short days. And then in the spring it'll kick on again, and I suspect relatively early next year it will have produced another set of leaves suitable to bloom again. So that's just a sort of type of pattern that Vandaceous type orchids have. Think of it as around 4 leaves per pseudobulb. Now some of them are not very floriferous, and it might take 5 or even 6 leaves. Some of them chuck out blooms like they're going out of fashion, and it might only take 2 or 3 leaves and you've got another node ready to bloom. It just depends on the hybridization process and whether it's a species or not. But as species Vandas go, I actually like that quite a lot. So that goes into the very pleased category. First time blooming for me, and a pretty little bloom. Very delicate. That's a sort of yellowy greeny colour with a nice mahogany red. Yeah, I like those colours. I like that a lot. Right, sort of coming to the end of today's watering session, shall we say, and I don't know why this Tolumnia just sticks out, and a lot of it is because what it's on. Now that's not your normal bark. That's a piece of driftwood off the beach, literally. And I can hear you all gasping with breath saying, oh goodness me, that'll be full of salt. That's spent 2.5 years in the garden being regularly turned over and rained on and weathered by the sun until there was no sign of any salt left. And to prove the point, I then soaked it in a bowl of water with a weight on top of it and tested that water to see if anything had come out after 3 days, and nothing came out. So I was quite happy that all the salt had been removed, because I'm sure that wouldn't have done a little Tolumnia any good. And if there was traces of salt in that, do you really think those roots would be grabbing hold of it? No, they wouldn't. They'd reject it. So I like that because of what it's on. Piece of driftwood, something a bit different. Weathered driftwood. Let me make that clear again. I don't recommend you go down the beach and find loads of pieces of wood and stick all your orchids, mount them. You'll just kill them. The salt will kill them. But anyway, that's coming on nicely. That's got 1, 2, 3, 4 new fans, and it would be nice if each one of them put a spike out soon. They're starting to look as though they're getting to maturity, so yeah, nice little Tolumnia. I like my Tolumnias. That's a nice orchid. Yeah, nice root system, grabbing hold, love it. Okay, so just something different to mount them on. They don't always have to go on the traditional cork bark, you know, there are other things. I mean, as I've shown you before, let's go back to Rodriguesiae. That's on a piece of oak bark. That's English oak, taken off a fallen tree in the forest, collected myself. And it works well because it's got nice gnarly bits on it. It cuts easy because it's thin. You know, look at your cork bark. That piece of cork bark is nearly 2.5 inches thick. That's a big piece of bark. And again there, look at the thickness of that. That's the sort of thing you get with the cork bark. It's just big and chunky. Whereas this is nice and thin and slim and looks more in keeping with the plant that's on it. So it doesn't always have to go on cork bark. Yeah, so think about if you're going to mount things, you know, there are choices. I mean, I've seen orchids mounted on pieces of stone. Now they're a sod to drill a hole in to hang them up, but you know, some of the orchids are rock growers, what better way to grow a rock growing orchid than on a piece of stone? I think you might have to look into and do a bit of research as to what type of stone. You know, some stone is quite porous, sandstony type stuff, and some is rock hard like granite and doesn't absorb any moisture at all. So you might have to look into what type of stone might be suitable. But yeah, it doesn't always have to go on a piece of cork bark. There are choices. Okay, that's all for this one. It's all bits and bobs, and it's just me looking round, picking things up as I water them, thinking about the future, you know, those long, cold, miserable winter days that I despise so much as an orchid grower in the UK, but I have to get through them. And what follows winter? Spring. Longer days, brighter light, and everything bursting into light and bursting into bloom with any luck. So, to look forward to. I know it seems odd to be looking forward to spring in August, but I like to think ahead. So I thought, last little closing shot with show off. Yeah, he's at it again. That really is the last spike this time. It must be. Cannot possibly produce any more. Show off you. Still, it's been good and beautiful blooms, there's no doubt about it. And prolific. A floriferous Dendrobium. What more could you want? Okay, thanks for dropping by. All sorts and bits and pieces and some gadgets and stuff for people who've sort of joined me recently who may not have seen how this whole setup works, sort of. And it does work. You know, it's taken a lot of planning and it's evolved over time. And it does work. You know, it's got hydration, it's got foggers doing their job. And they're on a hydrostat. So when the humidity drops below a certain level, they kick in. I don't have to do anything apart from fill them up each morning this time of year. You know, it's got circulating fans on a timer. Move the air around, keep it buoyant, keep it floating. And it's got the big extractor and the inlet fan and the little PC fans that they're on 24/7, those little fans. There's 4 of them. And, you know, during the night time when I close the door behind me and go to bed, those little things are just moving the air around enough to stop it remaining static. Now obviously temperatures drop at night, don't they? Yeah? But when temperatures drop, humidity levels rise. There's a pattern there. I think it's 11 degrees centigrade. So if you had... Hang on, let's get this the right way round. Come on, brain. I know you haven't had enough coffee. But if you had 100%... Now I'll start the other way round. Yeah, if you had 100% humidity at 20 degrees C and your temperature rose to 31 degrees C, that same amount of moisture would read 50%. Yeah? And that sounds like a hell of a drop. But the moisture level hasn't actually changed. It's just the molecules of air are whizzing around a bit more and farther apart, and yeah, so the moisture level, just the unit that you would be using to read it would just read lower. So as your temperature climbs, if you don't do anything about your humidity, the reading will drop. I mean, that little gadget there at the moment says the humidity is 68% at just over 28 degrees. At 28 degrees, 68% is going some, and that's the little foggers working their backsides off behind me. You know, that takes some doing. At 18 degrees, I'd be up near 100%. You know, so nighttime in here is very humid, and to have stale, still, humid air with lower temperatures is a recipe for trouble. That's where you get your bacteria forming, that's where you get your rots and your molds. Still air, low temperatures and high humidity is not good. You've got to keep your air buoyant. So, you know, do a bit of work at it. You know, if you're growing in the home, it's not quite so bad because you'll never have ridiculously high humidity levels. I mean, I like high humidity in here, especially when the temperature's up. So just some thoughts, and I'll see you all again next time. And thanks to all the newcomers, you know, keep watching and all that, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Bye for now.